All right. Hi, hello again. As before, I am Kendall McDonald with the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. I am here to talk to you guys today about a program that I have led for the past 7 years, the Kentucky Forest Biodiversity Assessment Program, which is a statewide assessment of American ginseng and mesic forests. And this is a project that is a partnership between the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves and the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. So American ginseng, or Panax quinquefolius, I'm just going to say ginseng from here on out, is in the ginseng family. It is found throughout eastern North America. It is widely distributed, but in low population numbers. It prefers mesic forests with nutrient-rich soil and moist but not wet soils, closed canopy, and a preference for older forests. Kentucky is the largest state exporter of ginseng in the United States. So because of that, ginseng is listed as special concern commercially exploited by the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves. And the Kentucky Department of Agriculture heavily regulates the digging, selling, and growing of ginseng in the state. It is also on the Appendix 2 of the CITES Treaty, which protects it as an exported plant that may go extinct without export measures. Ginseng is a long-lived herbaceous plant that takes many years to reach maturity. Realistically, a mature berry can go from seed to mature plant in about 10 to 17 years. And ginseng can live decades after maturity, with the oldest recorded ginseng in modern history being 93 years old, and that came out of Vermont in 2022. Unfortunately, ginseng faces harvest threats due to its medicinal properties. It is highly prized in East Asian medicine, especially China, and therefore there is a high demand for ginseng. This high demand translates into high economic value, with high quality wild root being worth 400 to $1,000+ per dried pound. We have harvested ginseng heavily since European settlement, and to give you an example of how heavily it was harvested in the past, in the 1880s, the largest annual export of ginseng for the United States was over 400,000 pounds, which equates to about 87 million ginseng plants. Today, as you can see, this report from 2021, harvest levels are much lower. We only exported a little less than 30,000 pounds in 2021. And that is probably due to overharvest in the past that has led to lower population levels, shifting economies in regions where ginseng harvesting was popular, and the legal regulation of the ginseng trade. At the same time, ginseng was being over-harvested. Its habitat was also being majorly reduced. Since European settlement, Kentucky has lost over 10 million acres of forest and almost all of our old growth forest. And I believe there is an old estimate out there that Kentucky loses about 105 acres of forest per day. And so why is that? Mostly logging. Kentucky is one of the top 3 producers of hardwood lumber. We do billions of dollars in wood product annually, and over 90% of Kentucky's counties have at least one wood or lumber related business. So it is obviously not going away as a booming economic force in our state. Unfortunately, on top of the human removal of trees, we also have some non-native invasive species and disease that have attacked several of our really common tree species. And we have also had, even just the past 5 years, extreme weather events likely caused by climate change that have affected very large portions of our forest. At the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, one of the goals of the National Heritage Program is to document high-quality natural communities across the state. We add them to our database, we monitor them, and if possible, we protect them. But there's a lot of forest in Kentucky. It's a lot of places to look for natural areas inventory. So it's kind of nice to have some parameters and funding to narrow it down. And that is what the Kentucky Department of Agriculture had. KDA had almost 300 ginseng populations that they had been monitoring long-term since 1978. Um, by monitoring these populations at OKMP and looking for new populations, it just made sense that since ginseng likes higher quality undisturbed forest, that surveying for ginseng would put our surveyors in higher quality forests in hopes of finding some mature and old growth stands. On the KDA side of things, they are required to monitor wild ginseng annually, and the data that we take goes into that monitoring and helps them determine the number of dealer's licenses available per county. KDA can also use the data we collect on forest with high quality ginseng populations in our natural area inventory methodology to create criteria for forests that have potential for successful and wild simulated ginseng growing. This is one of the most sustainable and profitable methods of ginseng growing because the quality of the root does not suffer and wild plants can be left in the wild to grow old. So what did we do? We mapped and added those almost 300 ginseng sites to our natural heritage database, and then we made a plan to split them up and survey as many as possible over 5 years until a statewide assessment was completed. The kinds of data we took were ginseng counts by prong number to help estimate the age of the population. We took comprehensive species list with abundance by strata. We took forest health information such as disturbances, age, structure, and invasive species. We took data on medicinal and rare plants, and we also did a trends and threat analysis. So the results between 2019 and 2023, we were able to map 376 ginseng populations across the state. 198 of those were able to receive a full survey and analysis. We were able to successfully access and survey ginseng in 105 of 120 Kentucky counties, and we counted over 7,800 ginseng plants. So, what is the statewide status of ginseng? Most populations are average to below average in size, meaning that they are less than 50 plants per population. Most are young to slightly mature. We did not have a single fully mature population throughout our 5 years of surveying, unfortunately. Ginseng populations in this program receive site scores to compare population quality and viability. And if you look at the chart on the left, you can see that almost 2/3 of our populations that we monitored fall into the poor or fair categories. And so that means that due to their ongoing threats, these populations will likely not persist at the same level or not persist at all in the next 100 years unless management changes are made. Our ginseng population trends are also mostly trending negatively, with over half of our populations either already gone and we can't find them anymore, or they are decreasing. So what does the forest habitat of a ginseng population look like? It looks like a mesophytic forest. We documented ginseng and Appalachian, acidic, and calcareous mesophytic forests throughout the states, and in the far west Kentucky in coastal plain Lost Bluff Forest. The majority of our sites had 75 to 100% closed canopy, gentle to steep slopes that were on north, northwest, or northeast slope aspects, with well-drained soils and no flooding regime. Any deviation from these conditions at all, either you're not going to find ginseng there or you're going to find a very unhappy, puny population of ginseng trying to survive in inadequate conditions. This table in the middle here is just the 30 or so most frequently observed species across all of our ginseng sites. And if you look at this list and you know anything about mesophytic forests, you'll see that this is just kind of a generalist mesophytic forest species list. So we wanted to find a way to separate what the species composition is at a high quality ginseng site and a low quality ginseng site. So we took those site scores that I talked about in the last slide, and we combined them with the species lists of each site, and then compared the species lists by the site score categories. And what we were able to do then was separate a low quality and high quality ginseng site species composition. At a low quality ginseng site, there were a lot of species with low C values, and so that means they are highly tolerant to anthropogenic disturbance. We had a lot of non-native invasive species. These sites had high levels of disturbance and lower ginseng numbers and lower ginseng population maturity. And if you look at some of the example species at the bottom left here, you can see that some of the frequently observed species are actually non-native invasive species. The first five are. So lower quality sites tend to have more of those. High quality ginseng sites have species in the species composition with higher C values, so they are less tolerant to anthropogenic disturbance. We would find a lot of state and globally rare plants at these sites. These sites had lower levels or no disturbance at all. We have found higher ginseng numbers and higher ginseng population maturity at these sites. And if you look at the example species on this list on the right, you can see these are all species that rely on rich, undisturbed forests to thrive. We assessed for a lot of different trends throughout this study, but there were three that really stood out that I'd like to talk about today. One is forest quality. As canopy cover and forest maturity, species richness, and floristic quality go up, we found that ginseng population numbers and maturity also went up, indicating ginseng relies on these high quality undisturbed forests. In contrast, as we saw non-native invasive species abundance increase, we saw our ginseng population numbers and maturity decrease. And we saw similar things with the amount of disturbance, especially logging. As the disturbance levels go up, the ginseng population numbers and maturity go down. So what are the most prevalent threats to ginseng and its habitat besides harvesting and poaching? For our study, it was non-native invasive species. At least one non-native invasive species was present at 85% of the ginseng populations that we surveyed. And the most frequent offenders were multiflora rose, Japanese stokegrass, and Japanese honeysuckle. Other threats and disturbances we documented were logging, including selective logging, deer browse, human development, and rodent digging. I'd like to particularly talk about logging and ginseng. If you look at the top here, this is in this red box, this is actually an excerpt from a ginseng grower's guide that I'm not going to name. But you can see here that the logger may be your best friend, that selective logging is good for ginseng. And you'll find this kind of sentiment throughout a lot of the ginseng growing materials out there. So when we looked into this, we found that a lot of that evidence, those studies or observations, a logging event would occur, and then they would only really look at the ginseng population for 1 to 3 growing seasons after that logging event. And the findings are true that temporarily, the first few growing seasons after a logging event, that increase of canopy openings and light to the floor does give us a temporary increase in ginseng. But if you start to look more long term, like we were able to in this study, you look 5, 10, 15 years past the selective logging, Non-native invasive species establish, and if there is enough disturbed ground and opening, and no anything, no management to keep it in check, you will get a non-native invasive species monoculture. And that monoculture will outcompete the ginseng, and then the ginseng population will decrease. And so a little bit of an extreme example of that is this picture on the right, where you can see that this place was selectively logged. It was selectively logged about 10 years before we visited. And this hillside used to have ginseng and now is just a Japanese steelgrass monoculture. It is not all doom and gloom, though. There were some really cool things that came out of this study. We found a lot of rare species throughout this 5 years at our ginseng sites. In fact, 1/3 of ginseng sites that we surveyed had a species of state conservation concern, all listed in this table on the right. We found 99 occurrences of 33 species of conservation concern during the project. 14 of those are highlighted in green on the table, are on the Kentucky Rare Plant List, and 4 pictured on the left here were globally rare species. So in conclusion, there is a positive correlation with ginseng numbers and high quality undisturbed forest, a negative correlation of ginseng viability and disturbance and presence of non-native invasive species. Though Kentucky has many populations of ginseng, the ongoing threats and habitat loss present a concern for ginseng's viability for future generations, and therefore continued monitoring is needed to evaluate population decreases and threats. And here are all my citations. So thank you very much. I know we're running behind, so please put your questions in the chat and I can answer them in our Q&A session at the end.